Hi everyone, I've always been planning to do this video for quite a while, but I needed to wait a few months of EV ownership to make sure that my experience, well, I suppose covered everything. That there's no point in trying to say what's the truth about owning an EV or EV ownership if you don't really understand. And the question is how long to wait before you can be qualified to say, yeah, I understand what it's like owning an EV. Basically, it doesn't take long, a few weeks, a few months, and pretty much you'll have done all the things that you might have been apprehensive of doing previously. For me, I do feel qualified to be able to say what's the truth behind EV ownership. And the idea of this video is to basically go down the middle of the road sort of thing, because you've got all of the people on social media and Facebook sites, especially, unfortunately, the Nissan Leaf site. When you look at that, there's so much negativity about cars being iced and cars running out of charge and problems with cars. It's just full of negativity, and it really might put you off going electric if you looked at that as a snapshot on its own of whether you should go electric or not. But then you've got the opposite side, where you've got people perhaps like myself, really enthusiastic. They've just got the car, they love electric cars, and they're going to say how wonderful they are and everyone should go electric. So, what is the truth? Because you've got the negativity on one side and you've got the positivity on another. But I wanted to do a video that basically cut through all of that, saw the truth, experienced what happens in reality when you move from a petrol or diesel car to an electric car, and explain that. If I was to say this video was about car ownership, then I couldn't really cover car ownership from a clapped out Nissan Micra through to a wonderful Bentley Bentayga. So you have to consider where I'm coming from. I'm talking about electric car ownership now and in the future for modern electric cars, for new electric cars. If you want to consider buying an older second-hand electric car, then perhaps you can take what I'm about to say, then remove some of the positives and add in some more of the negatives, and perhaps that would be a good way of looking into it. What I want to say is this is my experience now, having experienced and test-driven for extended tests all of the electric cars that are available to us at the moment, and now lucky enough to own and drive a very capable electric car, the Kona Electric 64 kilowatt hour. I've also compared this car to the 39 kilowatt hour Kona, so I think I have a good understanding now of how it feels and what the different cars are like to drive and to own. So the first thing to comment on is a positive, and that's the drivability of the car. They are really nice to drive. So because there's no gearbox, there's no clutch, there's no gears at all, it's just one single continuous drive from 0 miles an hour all the way up to whatever your car's capable of. This one, the Kona Electric, is just over 100 miles an hour, I believe. So there's no gear changes. The thing that's good about that is the delays that you get. So if you want to overtake something, normally there's the selecting the right gear, getting the revs right so you can accelerate fast enough and get past the other vehicle. There's none of that, because all the power is there instantly for you. All you have to decide is it now safe to overtake? If it is, move out and off you go. It's just much easier and faster. Is it less engaging is the question. Some people are used to driving manual gearbox cars, and they like the engaging drive of that, of selecting the gears and accelerating. Well, it's something that you miss and leave behind would be my description of it, because I'm an ex-petrol head. I used to love driving fast cars quite quickly, and I liked the idea of the gear changes. I never thought I'd want to drive an automatic, let alone a car with no gears whatsoever. But I do find it's more enjoyable. So I think the truth is, it is a more enjoyable drive, and you shouldn't be apprehensive of moving away from a traditional car with traditional gearbox. You're not going to miss out. It is very enjoyable to drive. Performance, that's exactly the same as well. So all of the torque is available to you right from the start. So acceleration from a standing start is very, very good in an electric car. But basically, it's a more linear feeling of performance. So in petrol and diesel cars, you don't get a lot of performance as you pull away at low revs, so you have to give it some revs to get the performance and get the power to be able to pull away. In an electric car, all of that performance is there straight away, so you get much more of a sensation of performance at lower speeds. And it's not that it's addictive necessarily, but it's pleasurable. It's pleasurable to know that you have the performance all the time. I find one of the best things about the performance of an electric car is when you're trying to pull out of a slip road, say onto a dual carriageway, and you're trying to ease into a gap. If you want to get into that gap that's ahead and you can see some traffic coming, sometimes it's harder to judge. In an electric car, because it's instantaneous power and because you can make that decision instantaneously, I find that you can go for the gaps and you can get the spaces much, much easier and much more safely. With a petrol or diesel car, you'd find you wouldn't be quite doing the right speed, so you'd want to accelerate, which means you'd have to change gear, and all of those things mean you have delays. I can honestly say that I prefer to drive an electric car now with the characteristics of that instantaneous performance than I did having a very fast manual petrol car. One of the big downsides of electric cars at the moment is that they are expensive. So for new electric cars, car manufacturers are releasing them as top-of-the-range models. The e-Golf, when it came out, that was priced around 32,000 UK pounds. That was the same price as the Golf R, right at the top of the range. So yes, with optional extras, you could actually get a Golf R that was more expensive than the e-Golf, but it's still right at the premium level. It was nowhere near the more entry-level S and SE models with small 1.2, 1.4 petrol engines. So in the range that car manufacturers are bringing out at the moment, there aren't comparable levels to the affordable cars that we're used to in the range of 10 to say 18, 20,000 pounds. That range of new cars doesn't really exist for electric cars. Yes, with the Renault Zoe at the moment, you can buy an electric car for under £20,000, but it doesn't compare to say the Ford Focus or the Volkswagen Golf at the level you would be paying for that much money. So at the moment, electric cars are expensive, and therefore they're not for the masses because the masses can't always afford them. This Kona Electric that I'm sat in right now, it's nearly £40,000 to buy before government incentives. That's a huge amount of money. So even if I was to knock off £5,000 for the fuel I might save over a few years, and knock off another £1,000 for servicing and another £1,000 for some car tax that I'm not going to afford, that's, call it £7,000. Let's call it now £32,000 to £33,000. I could comparably go out and buy something else for. Well, what could I buy for £32,000, £33,000? There's a huge number of cars and a huge range of features. There are coupes, there are sports cars, there are four-doors, there are hatchbacks, there are sedans, there are SUVs. There are lots and lots, a lot more than there are electric cars. So choice is a negative at the moment. There isn't as much choice. Now that will improve. It'll improve in time because all manufacturers are going to go electric at some point. At some point we'll all be driving electric cars. I'm absolutely convinced of that. It's just a better way to go. If we were designing cars right now with the technology that we have, there is no way we'd be designing cars to have petrol and diesel engines compared to electric. It just doesn't make sense. They take longer to build, they're more expensive, they're not as efficient, they're not as good for the environment. Nothing makes sense with the petrol and diesel engine. If you're starting from scratch and designing it as a brand new item today, and I honestly believe that, if there are people out there that think, oh no, we would still be designing petrol and diesel engines, then no, don't be silly. It's like saying we're going to design trains and still make them steam or diesel. It just doesn't make any sense. It's very, very old technology. And this is one of the things that you learn as you buy an electric car and get used to an electric car. Suddenly, what used to look like modern technology, as in diesel and petrol cars and all the latest versions, they now look and sound really old. And it's just an eye-opener that the difference in technology is significant enough to make you instantly feel that anything with an engine in it is old. Now, I'm not the sort of person that's going to keep harping on about electric's the way to go, electric's the future, and down with all the oil gas guzzlers and those sort of things. That's not me. But I can honestly say, for an ordinary person, I really notice the difference, and it does seem as though petrol and diesel cars are such old technology to me now. So there's me being positive again. So let's ping it back again and think about a negative. Well, one of the big negatives with electric cars at the moment is range. So let's get that one out of the way. Some of the older technology electric cars and some of the smaller battery ones that are for sale now aren't appropriate for everyone. Now let's look at the Kona Electric, for example. That I'm driving the 64 kilowatt hour, and I think it's brilliant. I think it fits most people's everyday car that you could want or need. You don't have any range issues in the car. Everyone would always want more range in an electric car if they bought it, but this really has enough. It honestly does. The 39 kilowatt hour, I don't think it does. I think it only suits certain types of people that are going to do certain smaller journeys. And I think if you look at the number of sales of that model of car, there's only been 2% of the cars sold for a Kona Electric have been the 39 kilowatt hour. 2%. People don't want it. People want the bigger battery, that will go further on range. So for all these car manufacturers that are bringing out new cars, I think even the new Citroen DS3 crossover, that's going to only have something like a 40-something kilowatt-hour battery. It makes me wonder whether they're really serious, because why would people want to buy that when they didn't want to buy the Kona 39 kilowatt-hour? It just doesn't make sense. People now are getting used to the idea that electric cars would and should have a range of 300 miles or close to it. We've got the Kia Niro coming out with the 64 kilowatt-hour battery. We've got the Kia Soul coming out with the same one. There's rumour that the Ioniq will soon be changed and come out with a bigger battery as well. So electric cars are getting better range all of the time. So our expectation of that range is going to increase as more cars come out with that capability. So if manufacturers bring out cars that don't have that capability and are sub 200 mile in range, in my opinion, they're not planning on selling very many. When Volkswagen eventually bring out their range of cars, it looks like there's going to be a range of different battery sizes. It'd be very interesting to see how many are sold at what level, because here's the truth about electric cars again. It doesn't matter what sort of car you have as an electric car, the first time you own it and drive it and go beyond the range where you can get back home safely and charge, and therefore you are stranded because you cannot get back home without having to charge, so you now have to charge. That feeling of going over that threshold of that halfway point in your range, so you have to turn around, you can't turn around and go home, you have to charge, that gives you a sense of anxiety. It doesn't matter whether you have a car of this sort of range, of 300 mile range, or a car with a lesser battery, it's exactly the same feeling when you cross that boundary of having to charge. And that's the big difference. Charging because it suits, charging because you can, charging at home because it's convenient, all of those things are absolutely fine. When you have to charge because you have to get where you're going, or have to get back home again, you will come across that slight stranded feeling. Now the good news is, that's fear of the unknown. It's not fear of actual range and range anxiety and those sort of things. It's fear because you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know whether the charger will work. You haven't done it before. You don't know how to plug in and do it. But you don't have that ongoing. That's just a new thing. Once you've experienced it, once you've gone past it, and suddenly you realise charging's not so bad after all, you don't have that issue. But if you follow on from that and think about how you plan your journeys and how you charge, then here is the biggest negative of all, in my opinion, for EV ownership. And that is that you have to plan. Because if you don't plan, then basically you're just going to drive somewhere, not think about your range, not think about where you're going to charge if you need to, and you're likely to run out because of it. So if you're the sort of person that doesn't like planning, EVs are going to be a challenge for you, because in theory, if you're going on a trip that's beyond the range of turning around and getting back home again, you're going to need to charge. But what if that charger is full? What if there are cars waiting there? Are you going to sit for an hour? You might have to wait an hour before it becomes free. What if you're second in line? What if they're out of order? What if you don't have the app or the card that's needed to activate that charger? All of those things are things that you don't know, because you don't know that charger, because you're driving somewhere perhaps where you're not familiar with. So because of those potential problems, again, fear of the unknown, you have to plan. So you'll probably charge not when you're very low, but you'll probably plan on charging when you've got sufficient range left in the car, that if that charger wasn't to be available and didn't work, you could drive on to the next one, and you'd have plan B on going to a different charger. And if you're like me and you like planning and you like contingencies, you might even have a plan C as well. So you'd probably be charging with 50 miles to go, and then again with 30 miles to go, and then again with 20 miles to go. And surely within 1, 2 or 3 different choices of different chargers, surely you'd get a charge within those. But if you don't like the idea of planning and planning your routes and planning your stops and all these contingencies, then that really is a negative. So I think planning is the huge one. It's just not talked about. So why is it not talked about? Because in an ordinary petrol or diesel car, we don't do any planning. It doesn't matter if the car's empty almost when it's on the driveway and you're about to set off, because you know you're just going to find a petrol station and you fill up. There are so many around. It is just second nature. We don't think about it. With an electric car, it is not second nature, especially when it's new to you. It is a new experience, and we don't know where the chargers are. Think about this. You drive along a road and you want to find a petrol station, then it's very easy to find because they have huge signage. They have huge signs showing you the price and the make of the petrol, etc. So There are even road signs, aren't there, saying where the services are to pull off. So to find a petrol station to refuel is very, very easy. For an electric car, there are no signs. The signs aren't big enough for you to see from the roadside. The signs aren't, well, I don't think there's any common road sign to say EV charging point, and you certainly don't see them as road signs on the edge of the road pointing you in the right direction. There is no guidance for it. Guidance to get to the chargers is only on sat-nav systems and on your mobile phones. That is the way to find them. You have to have a capability of using your car's sat-nav and using your mobile phone to find the chargers, because they are not obvious to you as you're driving along the roads. One of the huge benefits of an electric car is if you have a home charger, and obviously not everyone is capable of having a home charger, but this is a huge benefit if you can, that effectively for most of your journeys and most of your time owning the car, you're never going to have to refuel and wait for it. There's no going to a petrol station and getting dirty hands and having to go and pay at a kiosk. There's no sitting at a public charger and waiting half an hour or an hour. It literally is driving to your driveway, and before you pop indoors, plug the cable in, and that's it, and walk away. And your car will be programmed already to charge at the time that's appropriate to you, or you might be lucky and have a car with an app so you can configure it when you get indoors. But effectively, you just don't have to refuel your car and wait for it. So an electric car actually doesn't have a problem about delays charging. In most situations, it actually helps you never have to have a delay in your journeys and never have a delay refueling your car. The only time that's really annoying is when you need to charge because you've gone beyond that point where you can turn around and go back home again. And at that point, when you have to charge, effectively you have to wait for the charge. So yes, if you're in a situation where you can do something else during that time, you can go shopping, or you can visit a pub, or you can go for a meal, or have a comfort break, whatever it is that you can do to not be spending that time just sat in the car waiting. If you're in a situation where you're out working and you're either in the office working somewhere or you're in the car trying to get to the next place, then effectively when you get to a charger, or it would have been a petrol station in an ICE car, you have to wait and you have to spend that time to refuel. Now that is a poor part of owning an electric car, that waiting for the car to charge when you have to have a charge. So having a car that can charge quickly is important, and having a car with a range capable of going as far as possible before you have to have that charge. That combination of fast charging and long range, that's going to really help you. It would be silly of a person that's out all the time driving on business from place to place and is going to have to do several hundred miles a day. It would be silly for them to have a car that's only capable of doing 100, 150 miles of range, because they'd be forever charging every day, and it'd be really annoying. They'd be losing a lot of time. Now, some people would say, well, how far should you go before you should take a half an hour or 1 hour break? And I sort of agree with that. How far do you really want to go? But the realistic thing is, in real world and real life, what you do is you get in a car and you drive until you get to the next place and you have a rest when you get there. It's very, very rare that you're driving so far that you stop at services because you actually need the rest. You normally stop for another reason. It's either a comfort break, or you need some food, or in this case it might be an electric car stop. But that's not everyone, is it? Not everyone is driving up and down the country doing hundreds and hundreds of miles. So my honest opinion, range anxiety is not a problem anymore. It's charger anxiety. It's not a case of how far will the car go, because there are now cars you can buy that go plenty far enough. So your only reason to have range anxiety is because you've chosen to buy an electric car and it doesn't go as far as you need it to go, which is, I guess, a bit silly, isn't it? That, why have you done that? You brought the problem upon yourself. So it's either accept it because that's what you've chosen to do, or don't buy one yet, or keep saving until you can afford one that has the right range. Now, yes, in more years to come, there'll be a lot of second-hand cars with bigger batteries and bigger ranges. So in many years to come, more people can have the electric car experience for a lot cheaper price. But at the moment, it is an expensive thing to buy new, and even second-hand ones are quite expensive. Electric cars are cheaper to run. You can fill them up with electricity. That is just as expensive as diesel and petrol if you pay at a premium rapid charger on a public charging space. So it is possible to pay as much as petrol or diesel costs. But generally, electricity is a lot cheaper than petrol and diesel, so it is a lot cheaper to run an electric car. So long as most of your journeys are from home, you'll be charging from home. Now, whether you've got solar on the roof and hence get your electricity for free, or whether you're paying for your electricity, it's still about 1/5 in the UK, 1/5 of the cost of buying petrol or diesel. So you do save a lot of money. If you get some free chargers while you're out charging on public chargers, then that makes the cost even cheaper. But of course, if you have to pay for charging out because you're out driving a lot and need to use public chargers, then it costs more. So there again, the bigger the battery you buy, the bigger the range of the electric car you have, the more freedom you have to choose whether you charge at home or whether you charge away. And therefore you can choose to charge where it suits you economically for the price, but also practically. That convenience of choosing when to charge is a really, really big thing. The bigger range electric car you buy, the more freedom it gives you to make the choice and to save the money on the fuel. The smaller the battery you have, the more you have to charge because you can't go any further, or you can't turn around and go home. So you have to charge while you're away, and therefore you are stuck having to charge wherever the chargers are, and they might cost you quite a lot of money. It could be as expensive as petrol and diesel. But it's down to you to work out on the car you buy in the first place and how you plan your journeys as to how much it is going to cost you. So again, we're back to the planning thing. There's more to think about. With a petrol and diesel car, you just drive along and you wait until you see a garage with a price that you think, yeah, that's an okay price, I'll buy that. Because if you don't like the price of one, you can drive past and there'll be another one. That's not the case with chargers. There is less choice, and you don't know what the price is until you've already pulled up and parked. The signage isn't as good. So generally the fuel is cheaper. I believe it's about 20% of the price. So I used to spend about £1,000 a year on diesel. Now I'm probably going to be spending between £200 and £300 on the electricity, maybe even less this year because I'm actually getting quite a few free chargers. So while we're on costs, electric cars are zero tax in the UK, zero excise duty, unless of course it's over £40,000, and then it's quite a lot of money. I'm not going to go into all the tax bands are, but basically if it's under £40,000, it is zero. And that adds up, doesn't it? If you have your car for 5 years, then the standard tax rate for a car at the moment is £140 a year. So 5 times that, that's £700. So yeah, I might be saving £800 a year on fuel. I'm saving £700 over 5 years on tax. And then there's less servicing to do. There are less physical moving parts on a car that's electric than there is with the petrol or diesel. So there are less components to service. There's no oils, there's no gearbox and clutch and exhaust to brake. None of those things. So there is a lot fewer components to actually break and a lot fewer components that need servicing. There's a lot more technology on them, so that could go wrong, but that doesn't need servicing. It either works or it doesn't. How much you might save on that? Well, I don't really know, because you could decide to take your car for the same sort of annual servicing as you did with a petrol or diesel car, in which case you might not save that much money. So just because there's less servicing to do on the car doesn't necessarily mean you're going to pay less for your servicing, though, because some of the car manufacturers are still trying to, what I think is, rip you off by charging you £100, £150 to effectively spend 10 minutes putting the car on a computer and doing nothing to the car. If you took away the oil filter, the air filter and the oil on servicing of any petrol and diesel car, what would you be left with? There's very little to change. Obviously you've got these timing belt changes that are very common after 60,000 miles or 6 years. Well, there isn't anything like that, so you have no big expense after 6 years either. So electric cars don't have those servicing headaches. I would imagine that's going to make second-hand electric cars very, very attractive, because there's nothing major to go wrong. What puts you off buying a petrol or diesel car second-hand at the moment is the mileage and what might be going wrong. Or it's got 80,000 miles on it and the clutch hasn't been changed. Clutch might go. When were the brake pads and discs changed? Well, there's an interesting point. Brake pads and discs. Electric cars use most of the braking on regenerative braking. So this is where the motor is basically braking for you, effectively like engine braking on a car. An electric motor is doing the braking for you. You're not using the brake pads and the brake discs to actually brake very much at all. So they very hardly get used. In fact, if you're a gentle driver, you might not ever use them. Now the problem with that is they will rust and corrode. If you've just washed your car and pressure washed it, then you'll be getting water all over those discs and they will corrode, and that rust will start eating away on them. And if you're not engaging the pads onto the discs very often and scraping that rust off, it will just get more and more impregnated into the discs. So much so that you might find that after very few miles in an electric car, your discs need changing. So looking after your discs and ensuring that you actually use your brakes quite often is quite an important thing of owning an electric car. So just going back to the planning side of things, if you don't plan sufficiently, let's say you forget to charge overnight. Now, I'm probably quite bad at this myself, because I don't plug the car in every single day because I'm not a commuter, I don't work, and I don't have to go out every day. So if I was to forget I was about to go out and do 120 miles first thing in the morning, you think, oh, I forgot to charge. Well, if I didn't leave the car with sufficient charge to do that in, how much time do I have before I need to leave to actually charge the car to a safe level? So yes, if you don't plan and you don't remember to do the charging, you can find yourself with not enough charge on the car to get where you want to go and get back. So that either forces you to charge while you're out, or to wait before you go and charge some more. So on charging and up to 80%, well, here's another negative, I suppose, about electric cars. So we talk about the range of the car, and that's the range from 0 to the 100% charge on the battery. But that's not real, because when you're out and you're on a rapid charger, pretty much you're only ever going to charge to 80% or slightly above before you turn around and drive away. So you're automatically going to lose 20% of your range when you're on longer journeys, because you're never going to charge beyond that. The reason for that is because it charges slower. When you get beyond 80% full on the battery, the charger won't charge as fast. So you're going to have to sit for a lot longer time. It's quite reasonable to sit on a charger for nearly an hour to get to 80%, and then to sit there for another hour or more to go from 80% to 100%. So it makes no sense to wait that extra time. You're much better off taking that 80%, saying thank you very much on a fast charge, and then off you go to your next destination and you charge again. So you're not really talking about the full range of the car. It's not from 0 to 100, it's from 0 to 80. But is it from 0? Well, the answer is no, because you're going to want to leave some contingency. So how much contingency do you leave? Well, for me, I don't really like going below 20%. I know some people will probably be happy with 10%, but it depends on how big your battery is as well. That the bigger the battery, the bigger that the 10% means, and how many miles you can actually go. So for me, probably 20% is as low as I'd want to go, and anything lower than that, I want to know that I'm on the way to the charger. If you're going to lose 20% at the top end, because you're only going to charge to 80% when you're out on a public charger, and you're going to lose 20% because that's your contingency that you're not going to eat into, then you're actually only got 60% of the range of the car is what you're actually going to use. Well, that's terrible, isn't it? You know, if your car that you've just bought only does 150 miles worth of range, and you're suddenly going to lose 40% of that, you're going to lose 60 miles. That means you've only got a 90 to 100 mile range on the car, and you thought you were buying a 150 mile range. So the reality is that the range isn't as far as you really think, because you're going to lose some at the top because it's too slow to charge beyond 80% to the 100%, and you're going to lose some at the bottom because that's your contingency you don't want to eat into. So the range that people talk about in cars isn't quite the truth, is it? Because let's say again that somebody's advertising a car will do 200 mile range. Well, really that's 100 miles, because you don't want to drive more than 100 miles and then not be able to come back 100 miles, because mostly you want to charge at home, you don't want to charge while you're out. So your real range for most journeys is only 100 miles that you can go away before you come back. But it's not even that, is it? It's not even the 100 miles, because you're still talking about not running it down to 0. So if you're going to leave 20%, 20% of 200 is 40, so that's 160 miles. So if you're fully charged in the morning and you've got a 160 mile range, then that's 80 miles you can go, and then turn around and come back and do an 80 miles back. And that would have left you a contingency. So as you can see, if you're leaving some contingency from the 0 to 10, 0 to 20% range, and you're not always charging up to the 100%, your range of a car that you're buying is a lot less than the advertised range of the car, because you are not going to those 0 levels and the 100% levels. Battery temperatures and how to protect your battery is something that's worth talking about as well, because what is the truth about it? Well, batteries on electric cars won't charge as fast if they're too hot, and they won't charge as fast if they're too cold either. So they like it just right. And that is a bit of a pain in the backside, because you're not going to get your maximum charging rates when it's cold, and you're not going to get the maximum charging rates when it's hot either. You're only going to get it when it's in the sweet spot in the middle. So just like range isn't quite as advertised, charging rates aren't quite as advertised either. So expect to charge for longer than the adverts for the car, because the conditions that you charge in won't always be ideal. You'll be from cold sometimes first thing in the morning. They'll be hot after a 200-mile journey sometimes, so the car won't charge as well. Most modern electric cars like the Kona, though, do have active thermal battery management systems on board, so they will protect the battery and cool it down while you're driving and warm it up as well, to make sure that you have the best performance of the car and the best charging performance as well. So more modern electric cars cater for that better, but they still don't like the extreme cold and they still don't like the extreme hot. So it does take longer to charge than you might expect. Do you have to take great care of the battery? Is it a fuss? Not really. It's just like an engine, really, isn't it? That on an engine, when you start it up, you shouldn't really be revving it hard to start with, because it's cold. In the same sort of situation, if you happen to have a very low state of charge on the battery and it's really cold outside, you shouldn't really be thrashing the car driving really hard, putting a high electrical load through the battery, because it doesn't like it when it's cold and it doesn't like it when it's on a low state of charge either. So there are a couple of things you can do to help protect the battery, but effectively the battery management systems protect the battery already. So really you don't have to worry about it. Just as the same as a petrol and diesel car, you don't really worry about it. You just start the car and off you go. So no, I wouldn't be worried about battery condition and how to look after it. It's no different than it is in an ordinary petrol or diesel car and how you have to look after the engine. So I don't think you have to do anything special. If you want to take great care of it, it's no different to if you want to take great care of your normal car. Apparently, it is bad for your battery in the car if you charge to 100% and then leave it there for ages. Let's say you charged to 100% and then went away on holiday, leaving the car like it. That wouldn't be a good thing to do. And it also wouldn't be a good thing to do to run your car down to, say, 5 or 10% battery and then go away for a week's holiday as well. You're always better to charge it and leave it somewhere in the middle. There's no definitives. There's no do this and do that and the battery will be okay, or do this and do that and it will not be okay. It's just a general guidance. The car will look after the battery itself, so you don't have to worry about it, but there are a few little things that you can do to help look after it. Well, I hope that was helpful. I hope you appreciate hearing the truth. It is not all good news about electric cars. The difference in having to plan more and the fear initially about charging is real. And it shouldn't put you off having an electric car because the benefits outweigh it. And once you get through the not knowing and suddenly you do know and you are familiar with where the chargers are and how to use them, all of that goes away. And the only real issue you have left is more planning. Because if you don't plan, you're more likely to run out of fuel. Whereas in an ordinary petrol and diesel car, you don't really have to plan because you can always find a petrol station. You can always rely on one being around. So I hope that was useful. I hope you enjoyed that, and I hope that wasn't too brutal. I hope for those people that love electric cars, you don't think I've been too negative, and for those people that don't like electric cars, I hope I haven't been too positive. I wanted to say exactly how it really is, the truth. For me, I would never now go back to petrol and diesel cars. I would never choose one over an electric car. The experience of owning an electric car is better than a petrol or diesel car. Yes, there are more challenges about the charging away, but that happens so infrequently for me, and it's actually a positive experience most of the time because I'm getting those chargers for free now. I really don't mind. I really don't mind that extra planning. It is worth it. But would I go for a lesser range car than I have now? Absolutely not. I think it is very brave of people to try and use an electric car with a lower than 200-mile range for everyday use, ordinary use, where you're going to have small commutes and larger journeys where you're going to have to charge away from home more often. I think you miss out on some of the benefits of having an electric car, that freedom of choice of when to charge and the fact you can always get back home. So I wouldn't go for a smaller battery electric car, even if it saved a few £1,000s. I would wait, save the money, and get the best one with the best range possible. Anyway, take care. It was great to have you on board. Really appreciate you watching this. If you haven't subscribed, don't forget there'll be an icon around here at some point. Click that and it will notify you when new videos go online. Thank you, everyone. See you again soon. Bye-bye for now.